my name is Miriam. And this week I was thinking about how I enjoy learning many languages, and how sometimes I used some of those languages to learn other languages. Because the assumption here is that I want to keep most of them. There are some languages I didn't bother maintaining, they are not on the list. Like Japanese. I started learning Japanese and then it was too much for me. So this is not a language I would be using to learn another language, of course. But yeah, the assumption is that I'm going to keep learning languages, and I use that as a way of maintaining the...
One way I enjoy learning languages and maintain several active languages at once is what I would call a Russian nesting doll method, like arborescence or tree concept. One language at an intermediate level serves as a jumping off point for another language. I've done it more or less accidentally in a way to procrastinate. I use materials in one language I'm rather good at to learn a language I'm a beginner in. Or sometimes I continue learning both languages. This way I've studied modern Greek in Spanish, ancient Greek in Latin, Latin in Italian, Italian in Spanish, Chinese in Russian, and Russian in German. It's, as you see, not necessary for both languages to be related, even though it does help. What's important is that one is more advanced than the other. One language I really learned this way is Ukrainian. I wanted to go to Ukraine to learn Russian because I had some friends, teachers, and I thought, well, a country I can visit without visa. So I thought it was more convenient than Russia. And also, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was also attracted to the idea of a diglossic country. So I learned Ukrainian in both a very passive way, watching videos and shows and just tuning into the Ukrainian telly. And also, I took some lessons, I studied the grammar, the vocabulary. I would often rely on my knowledge of Russian, or I would look it up in Russian, so those languages interacted a bit in the same way that they interacted, I suppose, in Ukraine. But of course, little by little, with the hostilities and the tensions between Russia and Ukraine, there would be a push towards more Ukrainian in Ukrainian society, a push that both came from, it is both top-down and bottom-up kind of pressure. And from what I heard, at first you had this law that people were more or less encouraged, if they were in public position, to use Ukrainian. Even people that were way more comfortable in Russian, such as Ukrainian President Zelensky. And still, they adapted quite fast because they were familiar with Ukrainian. With the beginning of the war in 2022, a lot of Ukrainians decided to quit speaking Russian cold turkey. That was reflected in the media and also in how people are not necessarily very comfortable interacting in Russian now. Interestingly, that reminded me of War and Peace, where at the beginning of the story, the aristocrats are very comfortable speaking French to each other. It is not even translated by Tolstoy because it's assumed that the reader is going to understand French, or at least understand what French means within this context. Aristocrats interacting with each other. It was still a very important element of shibboleth, telling people that what you didn't understand was part of what you had to understand, basically. Groups use words that other groups can't understand because it's part of a language, signaling that you are part of a better group or different group, a subgroup that speaks a different slang or language. So this is the function of French in War and Peace. Little by little, with the invasion of Napoleon and the anti-French sentiment, you get this progressive Russianization of the novel, where even aristocrats are getting wary of French and start using Russian more and more. I have the feeling that it's happening in Ukraine, where this idea of not speaking Russian is in itself a symbol. But in this example, I wanted to show that you can learn two languages at once because they are culturally within the same space. So when I learn languages this way, the first factor for me is fun. I think it's really fun because by focusing on a target language that I want to learn and another one that is helping me learn, it feels like I am actually doing two things. I'm keeping my languages alive and I'm creating familiarity with the non-target language. So in my examples, learning Chinese with Russian is a way for me to feel that Russian is no longer a target language. Even though in another context, if I want to go deeper, strengthen, or really go to the fluent level, Russian is going to become my target language again. But in this context, within this very, very particular framework, I'm learning Russian as a comfort language, a language that supports my learning. And in this way, I'm more focused on Chinese, and Russian feels like a comfort blanket, something very familiar. And I'm building this kind of trust with the language, I think. So it creates familiarity. It's a way of keeping several languages alive. When I'm focusing on the target language, I can still listen to a lesson in Russian, focusing on Chinese tones and pronunciation. And this way, I really feel that Russian is in the background, kind of, and it sounds like I'm very organized and disciplined and that I have this Excel sheet kind of prepared and that I decide I'm going to learn Russian from German and then I'm going to go for Chinese. That's not what happened at all. What happened is that I just found a way to procrastinate that felt productive and fun for me. So I hope I inspired you to try. You can try it with a language in which you're intermediate, even if it's just the beginning of intermediate. And I hope that it makes you consume more language and enjoy it.